Thank you for joining us today for this Q&A session with Harness Racing Victoria General Manager of Operations, Vaughn Lynch. My name's Cody Winnell. Vaughn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Cody.
The point of today's Q&A session was to answer questions regarding Harness Racing Victoria's recent tiered prize money announcement. There's been quite a strong reaction from industry participants and people within the industry. And Vaughn, thanks for coming on to have this discussion today and answer people's questions.
Thanks, Cody.
Let's start with some background questions from me. The idea for tiered prize money, where did that start and what does it aim to achieve?
So tiered prize money has been discussed over many years. We've run with a socialist type prize money structure where all races, all standard races, receive the same money for a lot, and that system has been in place for many years now. What we've seen recently is a decline in the horse population, and we really need to arrest that because we need to fill 460 race meetings to at least maintain our funding at the current level. We've seen field sizes drop. We've seen participation both by people and owners and horses drop. We need to arrest that, and this was, along with a number of other strategies, was one of the strategies that we wanted to put in place.
Sure. And before we get to some of the questions from the social media audience, the Harness Racing Advisory Council, how did they react to the proposal? Were they positive or worried or cautious?
Yeah, look, the Harness Racing Advisory Council saw this proposal at their first meeting. So at that inaugural meeting, the council had to set their own parameters of what they needed to achieve. So it was that was one of the agenda items. It's fair to say that it was generally viewed positively by the Harness Racing Advisory Council, without getting into the real technical details of the proposal. But no, they're on the whole pretty supportive.
For sure. And we've seen a lot of the social media feedback, and it's all been very legitimate. These people have got genuine concerns for the industry, where things are headed, for their livelihood, obviously, and for the future of the sport at large. Can you describe the feedback that you've received? You've seen the social media feedback, and we'll get to that shortly, but just some of the other feedback that you've received and where you've received it from during the consultation process?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, Cody, because social media seems to drag out a lot of negative feedback, but going around the state, which I do, into a lot of race meetings, people generally have a positive feel about this. They may disagree with one or two components of it, and I've said from the get-go that it's a fluid document and it's a fluid process. So if we see one part of it that's not working, then we're quick enough to be able to adjust to it. And I think that in recent times we've seen that the number of $3,500 races was really questioned, and take that on board. So we'll have a look, and I've got some more information to talk about that later on. But I think even some of the people that have been most critical, I think the principle of the situation's okay. We've got to remember that in this proposal, over 2,000 races have had prize money increases from the current year. So there's been a lot of focus on, as it sits now, the 800 races that have dropped from standard prize money down to restricted grade, but we still have to remember on the flip side, we're only cutting up the same number.
Sure.
Okay, so the overall prize money was unchanged. It was just how that was distributed. And 2,000 races with extra prize money is a lot of races.
No, definitely. Well, let's get into it now with the questions from some of the people who really matter out there. A lot of these people are passionate industry people who have taken to social media, and a big thank you to everyone who sent questions using the Ask Vaughn hashtag. We simply won't have time to answer or to put all questions to Vaughn today, and some of them might have slipped through and just not been seen. So if you don't get your question answered, feel free to email info@hrv.org.au, put your name and number there, and Vaughn, you'd be happy to respond
Absolutely.
to all of those questions. So let's get cracking on the social media. Firstly, if I just call up the questions here from Steve Salter. So thanks, Steve, for posting the question. Steve asks, Vaughn, many have a view that HRV's approach to tiered racing will increase the number of odds-on favourites. As you stated, that's clearly not the aim. So what can you say to those people and people like Steve asking that question to allay those fears?
Thanks for the question, Steve. He's a big social media player, Pogger Solder. Look, we run data on all the races that we conduct, and I can tell you for the first for this season today, the number of odds-on favourites in $3,500 races is 34.7%, and that's down from the overall number, which is 44%. So that shows that most of the techniques we've got in restricting horses going into those restricted races are working. Some do slip through the system. The other thing that really impacts on the odds-on favourites is the average field, or the field size, and unbelievably the restricted races this season, they average a field size of 8.94, and considering that they've got a field limit of 10, despite the distance they're over, this in contrast to the average field size of everything else, which is 8.79, which is actually less when you consider that for most of our tracks, a field of 12 is allowed when the race is over the longer distance. So we understand that that's a possibility, but they're numbers that we track all the time, and we're very focused on. So the people in my team, we're focused on creating full, even fields with a lessening number of odds-on favourites. That is the aim of programming.
And we do have more questions that actually touch on this, on this point later on, with regard to some of the conditions for those restricted races.
Correct.
The next question was from Adam Logan, and Adam asks, Vaughn, what modelling have you done on turnover, field sizes, etc., and do you expect this announcement to grow prize money in 2 years' time? Of course, we've seen Victorian prize money grow 20% over the last 3 years. I guess Adam is asking, will that trend continue on the back of this announcement?
Okay, yeah, thanks Adam, another big player on social media. It's a good question, and the answer's complicated. What goes into prize money is a lot of items that we don't have any control over, and I'll give you some examples this year. The Tabcorp joint venture that we're a part of is running below budget, and there's a little bit of stuff going on between the Victorian racing industry and Tabcorp on this. There's a view that the 30-minute gaps introduced by Racing Victoria have hurt. Certainly the split vision at the start of the season, that also hurt. The feedback from some of the guys at Racing Victoria is that Tabcorp needs to lift their game in marketing. So despite all that, we get thrown around with the end result of the JV. So it's very hard to predict prize money levels, but I'll just put it to you this way to answer Adam's question, is that the mission statement for HRV actually says that the last line of it is to maximise returns to industry participants, or maximise returns to the industry, and we live by that every day. That's why we're here. So whatever we're trying to do, and this is one of them, is to put in a program that creates good even fields, good racing, and wants people to bet and allows people to bet on it. And that's what we've seen, and that's what we'll continue to strive to do.
For sure. So I guess the field sizes, as you say, stack up pretty well, but it is very hard to.
Correct. And every day of the week we are trying to program races that maximise field size.
Next questions come through from Craig Knott, who's a member of the Harness Racing Advisory Council and a very passionate trots man. Is there a fear that the $10,000 country front races announced as a result from this initiative, that they won't attract capacity fields?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. It's a fear for sure. There are many aspects of it, but I guess the overall concern we had, if we sat there and left the prize money model as it was, we would continue to see a decline in the horse population, which is what has happened over recent years. So we had to make some change for the benefit of the industry. It's a funny thing that a $10,000 country front race won't attract or may not attract a capacity field, because you would think that owners would demand that their horses are raced for the top prize money they could. It is a valid fear. We'll be monitoring it. It's worth noting that as part of this tiered prize money, the structure of the prize money also changed. So 2% of the overall stake is paid down to last. So even from sixth to last. So even a horse that goes and attempts one of those races and comes sixth will take home $200 less the driver's fee. So that's up from $125, which is the fee, the payment now.
Sure thing. And the next question that came through was one regarding the clubs. So we changed tact a little bit here. Vaughn, will all clubs have the opportunity to run Tier 1 meetings? So they're the races made up. The meetings made up of predominantly $10,000 races. Will all clubs get a crack at those?
What we'll aim to do, Cody, is that we aim to incorporate as many clubs as we can into the Tier 1 race meetings, provided that they run a Metropolitan Penalty Country Cup. So that's the sort of meetings that we would like to prop up with the $10,000 prize money on the other races, and that sees clubs such as Echuca and Ararat get an opportunity at those $10,000 races. So it's not all clubs, but it's the majority of clubs.
Pete Lynch, the next question comes from Pete. Do you have evidence from other states or countries that tiered racing will help? And if so, can you please provide the evidence?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. No relation, I must say, but Pete, the evidence mainly comes from the States, because in Europe there's not a horse population issue in any of the main jurisdictions, okay? So they've got the opposite problem to us. In America, there is a dwindling horse population. Now, the difference in America is that it's all conditioned racing. So this is, I guess the tiered racing is probably a step towards all conditioned racing, but in America, the races are for horses, for example, for horses that haven't won $10,000 in their last 4 starts, or they're for claimers. They run a lot more claimers over there. So what we've found by studying the American model is that the programmers are able to draft up races that suit the horse population that's around at the time, and they really draft those races up to guarantee full fields. So that's the evidence that we're basing it on there. And the conditions, or more conditions on races, is something we'd like to have a look at into the future, but obviously under the national handicapping system at the moment, we're locked into that, and we'll continue to try to maximise field sizes that way.
And we've heard conditions mentioned a few times, Vaughn, and the next 2 questions speak directly to that point. Simon Sharp, thanks for the question here, Sharpie. He addresses a point that's been made by several, and it's a very real concern. It's how will the new system abolish superior horses from picking the low-hanging fruit? And the follow-up question that came from Tay Pratt, so thanks for that, Tay, was she said a horse ran 5th in the New Zealand Derby and was able to come and win an R1 race recently. So Tay obviously doesn't think that is fair. So what do you think of that, Vaughn, and maybe some of the options that HRV have around conditions to ensure that people can't just constantly pick the low-hanging fruit?
That's right. Thanks, Simon. Gee, you picked the best of the social media expertise out here. Simon's a prohibitive tweeter. Look, and it's a great question, Simon, and we do have a list of conditions that are currently used and also ones that are under consideration for implementation. So what we might do, without reading through a full page of conditions, is put them up on the website after following this, or attached to this video, and people can have a look, and feel free to comment to me via info@hrv.org.au. But some of the stuff for graduation races now, we have them restricted to horses that have not won one race in their last 6 starts, for horses with nil lifetime wins, or class restricted races to a 4-year-old and older. But we've got other stuff that is in the on the draw card on the planning, so we'll go through that. In answer to Tay's question, that was a specific example, and that one, I put my hand up, that one slipped through the system. The New Zealand Derby that the horse ran 5th in was 13 months earlier, so it was actually the 2015 New Zealand Derby, and that horse had won 2 of his subsequent 6 starts before the first up win. That night at Melton, there was 2 R1 races. Sorry, I'll get that out. And one of them had restrictions which would have restricted this horse from running. The race in question was a junior drivers race, for drivers that hadn't won more than 10 races. So we took the condition off that. Dean Braun's a master at placing his horses and was able to find that loophole. The horse started short and won easily, but as with everything, you learn as you go along, and so that sort of thing wouldn't happen again. And Tay doesn't think it's fair. I probably don't think it's fair either. We want, as I said before, full fields, even classes, and no odds on favourite. Well, but limited odds on favourites.
So we'll put that document up online, and a key part of that there, Vaughn, is the conditions under consideration for implementation. So that means there are some new conditions being talked about, and hopefully, by the looks of that'll result in what you say, speaking about.
Yep.
More even fields.
And I must say, invite feedback, particularly under the items for consideration. So.
Good stuff. The next question, we'll push on. Matthew McGrath and Brett Coffey were singing from the same hymn book on this point, that being that our races in general are deemed, in the eyes of many, to not be a great look for the sport. So Brett asks, do you think it's a good look for Victorian trots to have over 30% of races worth $3,500? And Matt asks, how will an increase in our races be good for the sport?
Okay, so the answer to both questions is the same, is that the turnover on these races, there's no discernible difference between a 3,500, a 7,000 or a 10, right? So how it looks, I think, is really intrinsic in the sport rather than how people outside the industry see us. So putting that aside, what does look good for the sport is having good racing, full fields, not many odds on favourites, no real short price favourites, and that's what people see. What doesn't look good is 6, 7, 8 horse fields with a $1.10 favourite that jumps straight to the front and leads all the way, and that's the sort of thing that puts any new type punters off harness racing, because they'll think that there's no value, and they'll think that they can't get a winner.
Sure thing. And Brett Coffey puts through another question here, so thanks for those questions, Brett. He asks, was the decision to have $3,500 races financially motivated, or do you believe it will help achieve your overall objectives?
So the number of $3,500 races was dependent on putting up the other 2,000 races. So all that happened was $18 million was cut up differently to how it is now. It used to be cut up 424 restricted races, and the remainder as basic stake money. Now it's cut up differently as has been shown, and I've got some more information down the track on it. So it wasn't financially motivated in fact of saving money, and I'll put it out there right now that there's no advantage to HRV. We are a not-for-profit organisation, so we want to get as much revenue in as possible and pay out as much prize money as possible. That any inference to the contrary is simply incorrect, and so that's what we're trying to do. And to grow the revenue, we need to get the fields better and the horse population better. So wasn't financially motivated in the way the question reads, but it was definitely aimed at helping achieve the objectives.
For sure. We better push on to the next question here, Vaughn. The Vicbred scheme and the bonuses, they're clearly some of the best things that are happening at the moment in the eyes of a lot of people in racing in Victoria. So Todd Matthews asks, will the full first win bonus continue to be paid on C and M class races despite the increase in number of R races? So maybe if you could just explain how the Vicbred bonuses will work. Are there going to be less opportunities for horses to get that bonus?
So the first win bonus is paid on C and M class races, as Todd pointed out, at $7,000 2, 3 and 4-year-olds. And if a horse wins a restricted race, it gets half, so it gets 3,500. It needs to win a C-class race to collect the other 3,500. A new initiative that we did bring in as of the new calendar, 1 September, will be to pay a first win bonus on 5-year-olds and above that have been Vic bred, and that came after extensive consultation with Harness Breeders Victoria. But to answer Todd's question directly, there'll be no change in the initial stages. What we hope to see is that there's a lot more horses now that put into work that win their restricted half penalty, and that will offset the amount of that don't win the full penalty. So we'll have more horses earning less. But look, we'll have to track that. We've got really good data on that across the season, and if there's issues with it, we'll look to adjust it. But as I said, the aim is to pay it out. We want to reward owners. They're doing a great job. So, yep.
Next one comes through from Chris Lang Jr. and he was asking some questions regarding tiered racing, turning around some trends for the better. So I'll take up Chris's point here, Vaughn. What sort of time frame will HRV put on tiered racing achieving its aims and its goals and what it sets out to achieve? How will that be judged? And will things be rectified and tinkered pretty quickly if it's not working? You're able to provide some time frames, because that's obviously something that people are concerned. If it's not going to work, at what point will we know that it's not working and it's time to tinker with it?
And I noted Chris's graphs that he put together on Facebook, which were quite polished. Well done to Chris for that. And I guess that comes down to the core point of why this is being trialled, is to arrest some of those declines that he was showing there. Now, in terms of tiered prize money, it's not the only thing on the radar. There's a lot of other initiatives that are in play to improve breeding, ownership, experience for trainers, all of those things. But in terms of time frame, we're working with a really fluid system, okay? And I'll be able to explain how fluid it is by the end of this. But the new harness racer comes out every 2 months. If we see something that's not working, we can change the programming or the handicapping, whatever, within that type of time frame. So we'll give this a full year and judge it over a full year, because the horse population ebbs and flows in that time, and we'll be quite transparent with participants and the public about how it's going, how much we're paying out, how much we budgeted to pay out, and the field sizes and everything else.
For sure. Well, it'll be important to make sure we put all those stats out, obviously, when the time comes.
Absolutely.
The next question, a question that a lot of people have been asking in roundabout ways, is that it's really a two-tiered system of country front racing, or career penalty races, and more restricted races. Was there a push for 3 tiers of country fronts and abolish the R races altogether? And what was the reason, I guess, for going down this path as opposed to that path, which I think John Hallam spoke to the other night on the radio with this point, and saying that there are a number of trainers who would have preferred the 3 career penalty tiers.
Yep. No, it's a good question, and I did have a good chat to John Hallam early on in the piece regarding the tiered prize money, and I think on the whole, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, he was in principle in agreement, but didn't like the restricted aspect of it. Now, that was debated long and hard, both at management and board level, about where that level got to. The reason it came down on the side of restricted races at the moment is that the growth and the number of nominations we get in those races far exceeds any other race that we get. Okay, so we saw that as a growth opportunity, and any growth in the horse population is going to come at the bottom. Okay, so that was what we saw. I take the feedback on board, and certainly can say that another tier, say it was $4,500, was certainly considered. The maths looks a bit different at that, but we will, as I said before, we will have a close look at this at the start. If the restricted races are not working, then we'll modify it.
So being fluid, obviously important. That's the consistent theme the whole way through.
It is important, and I take it when I go to the race. I spend a lot of time with the horse people and welcome the opportunity to listen to their views. So that's the reason I do it, and as most of them will know, their views are taken into account.
Next question, Vaughn, comes from Russell Edwards. He asks, will any of the R races be chosen from the top down when field selection occurs?
So at the moment, there's a racing policy, and thanks, Russell, for the question. There is a racing policy that says that this is not the case, but as I've said it again, it's fluid. All facets of this system will be closely monitored for improvements, and if we see horses getting balloted out at $7,000 or $10,000 level and not being able to get in at the restricted level because it's picked from the bottom up, then we'll make that adjustment. But at this stage, that's not in the planning.
Thanks to Russell for that one. The next question, we've only got a couple left. We're running out of time, so we better whip through it. Andy Gath, the leading trainer, asks Vaughn, if the majority of the industry reckons this system is doomed to fail, why implement it? So I guess the question there relates to the feedback you've had. Is there an overwhelming majority of people against it, or do you think that's, or do you think it's just people at the moment on social media with their with views of concern and legitimate concern, or how do you sort of judge that feedback?
And I went and had a talk to Andy about that question on Friday night at Melton, and sure, there's some people that are dead against it. There's others that agree in principle, and there's others that may be waxing and waning. But I don't think that I dispute that the majority of the industry reckons this system is doomed to fail. If it is, we would be able to roll it back, as I said, with the fluidity of the proposal. But I'm confident in the proposal. I think it'll be positive. I've got no doubt that we won't get it exactly right to start with, and we'll have to tinker with it. But that's the part of being in an industry where we're all working together, and I'll continue to be talking to Andy and anyone else who wants to talk to me at the races about these types of issues. And for those that want to know, I'll be at Terang on Tuesday night and Maryborough on Wednesday afternoon, and Melton on Saturday night, so please feel free to grab me then.
Yep, so it's Terang tonight, and plenty of other opportunities for people to bail you up this week. And before we finish, Vaughn, the final question, how will the budget for 2016-17 affect this initiative going forward?
Well, it's interesting, and that was a great point raised by Shannon Nixon, the president of Harness Breeders Victoria, who I've had a long chat to over the last couple of days regarding the proposal. And in this financial, what we did when we put the proposal together was be very conservative in the number, because we never know what's going to happen, and it's better to not over-promise something if you do not know that the money's there. So it was predicated on $38.3 million in prize money going out for the year, and there's a bit of crossover with season and year. But putting that aside, looks like we'll come in this year just under 40 million, at about 39.7 million in stakes that'll be paid out, and so that gives us an extra $1.4 million to apply to this system. And if the system, as everyone says, is doomed because of the number of R races, I'm going to go back to the team now and go through it, and 1.4 million delivers an extra $407,000 races. So if the end number as we go into this new season on 1 September is circa 800 restricted races, which is double what it is now, still achieves the goal of giving the little guy a chance. The number of standard races, $7,000 races, increases from 1,500 to 1,900. I think that takes some heat out of it, and the number of $10,000 races is around 500. So that'll mean that 2,500 races have been increased in that budget, and that can only be good news for the industry.
Well, Vaughn, thanks very much for sitting down with us today and answering the questions of the concerned industry people on Twitter. I'm sure they appreciate it. No one's got a silver bullet for all these things, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much, Cody, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to explain the system in more detail. And I just want to leave the industry with the support of everyone at HRV. We are trying our hardest to make maximise returns to the industry. Everything we do every day is designed at increasing revenue through wagering turnover and in turn returning it to the participants, whether they be breeders, owners, trainers and drivers. And I understand what a tough job that everyone out there's got, but I really hope that the industry pulls together, because we're fighting a war out there for the entertainment dollar, and the better we can all work together, the better the industry will be. So good luck, and I hope to see you out at the track very soon.
And remember, info@hrv.org.au if any of the questions, if you've got any questions from today's session, and Vaughn, as he said earlier, will be only too happy to answer those. So
absolutely.
Thanks very much for watching.
Thanks.